Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richie Farrell. I'm Head of Investor Relations at Cleanaway, and welcome this morning to the first of our investor series, where we'll be covering energy from waste. This is the first of a series of investor hours that we're going to do over the course of the year, where we'll do deep dives into several projects that Cleanaway and management are working on. Today's presenters will be Vic Bansal, the CEO and Managing Director of Cleanaway, Frank Linfeld, our Executive General Manager of Strategy and Mergers and Acquisitions, and James Pearce, the Project Director for the Energy to Waste project. Brendan Gill is also on the line, our CFO, for questions later on. Today's session will begin with a formal presentation, followed by a questions and answers session. I'll mute all participants to ensure there's no accidental interruptions. And for the Q&A section, can I ask that you either raise your hand using the raise hand function on Zoom, or type your question into the chat box and we will address it. I'll now hand over to Vic to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Richie. Good morning, everybody, and appreciate you joining us today. The presentation was released to ASX this morning, so we will assume you have it. But in any case, we will be sharing the screen with you as well. I'm assuming you've read the disclaimers, which is on page 2. On slide 3, as Richie said, I'll just give a quick snapshot and summary, a value creation story, footprint, 2025 value chain, and a very brief strategic rationale. I'll hand over then to, we'll have a video animation which runs for 2 minutes, and then I'll hand over to Frank and James to talk through the Energy for Waste project in detail. As Richie said, we are intending to do 1-hour investor series presentation over the next couple of months, leading to half-yearly results, and you will see the multiple management leadership team presenting to you the different projects we're working on. Taking you to slide 4, again, for the people who follow us, next slide, James. People who follow us all know Cleanaway, so I'm not expecting to go into the details, but people who are new to Cleanaway, Australia's leading total waste management company, market leader in every single waste stream we play in, as well as have a significant regional and national footprint, about 6,000 plus employees, a significant large fleet, 250 sites, but more importantly, 125 plus priced infrastructure, EPA permitted assets. We generate renewable energy. We are ASX 100, a market cap of anything depending on the share price, $4.95 billion. We have the 100 plus municipal council contracts all over the country, about 140,000 plus commercial industrial customers, and 10,000 plus medical waste customers. So a significant footprint backed by a very strong infrastructure assets at the back of the value chain. If I can ask you to go to page 5, and apologize for being so small, but this is available on our ESG release, which we did in August. So this whole, I do want to talk a little bit more about this without actually going into every single word. I'm really proud that our internal narrative and external narrative is aligned. We have what we call Cleanaway Way, which we call it a strategic plan on a page or our toolkits, which includes fundamentally 4 pillars: people, market, assets, and finance. And obviously, our vision statement to making sustainable future possible is relevant to the earth piece. And so we are very clear on how we create value. What do we focus on? Then align that with the value chain in the middle. In the middle, those 2 circles are in the straight value chain. And then we create value for people, market, earth, assets, and finance. So the back of my screen, you see this round circle, Cleanaway Way. So our internal narrative of 4 strategic pillars of people, market, assets, finance, excuse me, is fully aligned with what we do in outside to create long-term sustainable value for our stakeholders. All our ESG reporting is aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so I would strongly encourage you, if you do get a chance to read it, please do read it. We do believe our value creation story, which is part of our ESG narrative, is very well thought out. On page 6 is our value chain and kind of delivering footprint 2025 on a single page, I can call it that way. Some of you have seen there are new additions to this page, which I want to bring to your attention. One is on the collection side. We have completed a C&D acquisition in New South Wales for Grasshopper, a small acquisition, nothing big, but fundamentally gives us a C&D presence and exposure to infrastructure in New South Wales. We do have C&D presence all over the country. In fact, we believe we are the second largest C&D player around the country now. And New South Wales was the only one where we had a gap, and we have now filled that. So that has been a good acquisition, and it's been running about for a month, and we will integrate that over a period of time. Then you come under resource recovery, and in that you're going to find something new here, which is the Western Sydney MRF. Last week we got confirmation that we won the Blacktown MRF contract for 7 years, of 7+ extensions, of course. That will give us a 20,000 tons of commingled waste with a contract to build a MRF. The MRF, which will be built in Blacktown, which have a total capacity of 110,000 ton. What this MRF contract with Blacktown does underpins our investment into a MRF, which we needed in Sydney. This will be a commingled MRF and would be having a capacity of almost 25 to 30% of the total Sydney Basin Council. You may or may not know, but one other MRF in the Western Sydney got closed down, and we are not sure whether it's going to get rebuilt or not. So there is a spare capacity which we wanted to fill in, but we wanted to wait for the Blacktown MRF contract to come through. So that will go on. It's a good profitable contract for us, and also please remember the residuals of this MRF will also go into future energy for waste project, which James and Frank is going to talk about. If you then go to the right-hand side on the treatment and disposal, you would see two things we've added. Extension of Erskine Park landfill. As you know, this has been a closing landfill, hardly taking much volume. We now have an extension for about 450 to 500,000 ton waste, which can go for another 2-3 years. We will be extremely conscious of how to fill that up. We are not planning to fill that up with a normal waste. We would be, because it can take highly contaminated soil and asbestos. We would be positioning to aim that at the higher end of the market. So that has been granted as well. And also the Northern New South Wales, I should have added, and another New South Wales medical autoclave. We do have a plan to extend our medical footprint into Northern New South Wales to capture the growing population on the health side in the Northern New South Wales. So that's something new added to that. Rest you already know. And also, by the way, Victorian Regional Landfill, which some of you know on the treatment disposal. So we also completed a Stowell landfill, a regional landfill in Victoria. And that is primarily to make sure in Victoria, there's a discrepancy of landfill levies between metro and regional. We do believe that arbitrage would grow in future. Plus, there's a growing need in that part of the world. So having said that, so we are continuing on an extension of a value chain, both vertically and as through plastic pelletizer and glass beneficiary that carries on. On slide 7, again, I was not going to go into details of this one, but just want to make sure that the Energy for Waste project, which James and Frank is going to talk about, actually satisfied our resource recovery value chain. There's a market need for it. There's a 2 million tons of waste from Sydney is currently being sent to landfills. There's an environmental need for it. There's a significant investment in local jobs potential for this, and it financially stacks up very nicely. So I'll let James and Frank to cover that. But before they start, there's an animation video which we'll love to show. And then James, you take over. Thank you.
We'll just show this.
And this.
Yeah, just opening this.
Can this see?
Landfill.
Just apologies, I believe the audio didn't go through on that, so if you click through the link and watch it on your own time, you'll be able to hear it.
Okay, you should be able to hear us now. So thanks very much for that, Vic. Hopefully the audio does come through. My name's James Pearce, and excited to talk today about the Energy from Waste project in Western Sydney. So one of the key things that I wanted to touch on first is that we have partnered up with Macquarie's Green Investment Group, which are a part of the Macquarie Capital. They're an experienced developer and investor in energy from waste projects around the world. Macquarie, through their Green Investment Group, currently invests in over 35 energy from waste and bioenergy projects worldwide, and we're very fortunate to have them on board. They're also the first, or developing the first energy from waste project in Australia, which is in Kwinana in Perth, the Avertus Energy Project. The slide on the table gives you an idea about their participation in various projects. So quite a significant investor and developer worldwide. So we are working through the Western Sydney Energy and Resource Recovery Centre with Macquarie, and they're a key part of our team on a day-to-day basis. Over the next slide, so in terms of achieving the waste diversion targets, as Vic touched on earlier, through the value chain, we are working very closely within the waste hierarchy, and you'll be able to see on the left-hand side of the page that Recover Energy is where energy from waste sits. In addition to that, as part of our project, we are looking higher up the waste hierarchy. So there's the recycle part of that as well, and increasing the resource recovery side, as well as participating in the disposal through the landfill. One of the key parts which we're comparing to is the worldwide statistics, and particularly in the UK, where there's a significant uptake of energy from waste projects. You'll see the various levels of both energy from waste as well as recycling and composting, with Australia demonstrated on the right-hand side. So a long way to go, but a key part of the project is both recovering that waste as well as recycling anything prior to getting to the energy from waste facility itself. One of those key components is FOGO, Food Organics and Garden Organics, generally also known as the green bin, which is slowly being implemented through councils Australia-wide. The graph on the left demonstrates the residual waste generation per capita, measured in kilograms per week per person. So if you look at where 3-bin FOGO is being implemented, on the far right-hand side of that is the Penrith Council. We are seeing a slow change to that. But what it does is, by implementing FOGO in a multi-bin system, allows us to actually take more waste to the energy from waste facility. There's a key part of that, which is the energy from waste policy, the 2015 policy, which is published by the New South Wales EPA, which allows us, by implementing FOGO, to actually divert more waste to the energy from waste facility. Overall, one of the key parts to that is complying with the policy. And our proposal, which is currently on display, or sorry, has been on display through DPI, is compliant with the policy. And one of the key parts to that is both Cleanaway supporting and investing in infrastructure for FOGO through the proposal itself. It is really important to do that, and it reduces emissions from organics to zero by 2030. So tying in with both the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy, as well as New South Wales 20-year waste strategy, which is due for publishing next year. The key components of the feedstock or the fuel for the energy from waste facility in Western Sydney are two types of waste only. There's commercial and industrial waste, which is commonly shopping centre, warehouse, manufacturing, office and school waste, which is collected and goes directly to the energy from waste facility. There is resource recovery through that as well, which allows us to take into a significant portion of that waste. In addition to that, the other source of fuel is municipal solid waste or council red bin waste, which will be contracted through councils in Western Sydney over time. Like I said before, the FOGO implementation in those areas allows us to take more of that waste directly to the facility. These are the only two types of fuel which will be utilised in Western Sydney. There are a lot of fuels which are excluded from the fuel source, for example, construction and demolition waste, medical waste, hazardous waste, contaminated waste, is all not permitted and is not required for the energy from waste facility. The composition will change over time from both C&I waste and MSW waste, and we have considered that throughout the life cycle of the project. In terms of the project site itself, the location is at 339 Walgrove Road, Eastern Creek, depicted by the red square. It's directly adjacent to the M7. On the right-hand side of the square, which is the eastern side, is the existing GRL processing facility. To the north is resource recovering facility, where there's garden organics and green waste being processed by Suez. Over the M7 is an existing industrial area. To the south of it is an existing brickworks, so Austral Brickworks, and then our other stakeholder and neighbour is Gascorp, which is located in the foreground of this page. Directly to the south is the Water New South Wales pipeline, or the Warragamba pipeline, which cuts almost all of Sydney's water directly from Warragamba Dam. So we do have some key stakeholders in the area who we have been engaging with very heavily, and we continue to do that. In terms of a very high-level overview of what the process is, we have looked at a lot of different technologies, but we are deploying the moving grate technology. So in very general terms, the waste comes in on the left-hand side. It's mixed and sorted within the bunker. It is then put into what is called the feed hopper and then flows down the moving grate, which incinerates between 800 and 1200 degrees Celsius. The heat produced from that boils water and is superheated into steam, which drives a generator and a turbine, producing electricity to come out the back end. We do have a number of offtakes, and I'll take you through them shortly, but they are key parts of ash which come out of the facility, which are treated and reused, and I'll take you through them shortly. In terms of complying with the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy, there's some very key criteria. One of those is identifying reference facilities. The reference facilities must be operational facilities which have similar waste streams. So for us, that's MSW and commercial and industrial waste. They also must use the same moving grate technology, or the same technology, as well as the same scrubbing and air cleaning technology throughout the whole back end of the process. They also must be of similar size. So the two facilities we have chosen and identified are the Phil Borner facility in Sweden, as well as a Covanta facility in Dublin. Coincidentally, Macquarie also has an equity stake interest in the Dublin project. But what this has allowed us to do is take data source and real data from existing facilities and utilise that to inform our environmental impact statement, as well as review the technology and how it's working today. One of the key things which people always ask about, and one of the key slides which we like to show people about energy from waste and the key air pollutants, is this slide. So the 4 key pollutants which are reviewed by both the EPA as well as informing the human health risk assessment are sulfur dioxide, or commonly known as SOx, nitrogen dioxide, also commonly known as NOx, dioxins and furans, and fine particulate matter, which is called PM2.5. It's the micron size. If I take you through the top left, SOx as a prime way of explaining this chart, on the left-hand side in the dark blue is the New South Wales EPA POEO limit, so the emissions limit in New South Wales. Currently that is set at 50 for sulfur dioxide. To the right of that in the light blue is the European Industrial Emissions Directive limit, which is also set at 50 for sulfur dioxide. Then there is a new document published late last year, which is called the BREF, or the Best Available Techniques document in Europe, and that sets out the high and low limits based on the best available techniques in the world for using energy from waste facilities. So the high limit for SOx is 30 and the low limit for SOx is 5. That's called the BREF high and BREF low. The Dublin reference facility, of which our technology and our project is based on, so that's again using the same technology, similar waste streams and same size, is currently directly emitting 0.25 of that measurement. So in comparison to what is the New South Wales limit, the European limit, and then the best available techniques in the world document, the high and low, you can see the current technology which we will be deploying in Sydney on the right-hand side. sometimes tens, if not hundreds of times lower than the actual limits, which are set by the New South Wales EPA and the best available techniques in the world. So this slide gives you 4 of those key pollutants and demonstrates exactly what the current facility is producing over in Dublin. So a long way lower than all the limits. It's a really key and a really important slide which we like to show people. In terms of carbon dioxide, through the facility itself, we can demonstrate that there is a net carbon dioxide equivalent reduction of about 390,000 tonnes per annum when comparing directly with landfill. The way that's calculated is demonstrated on the graph on the right-hand side. So the facility itself produces about 321,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year. We offset that via methane avoided from landfill, and that takes into account about 50% capture of the methane and utilising that. In addition to that, with the offset of the power produced from the facility, which is about 55 megawatts a year directly exported to the grid, there is an offset when comparing to fossil fuel production of electricity of 310,000 tonnes. So overall, that calculation gives us a net carbon dioxide equivalent avoidance of 390,000 tonnes per year. In terms of stakeholder and community engagement, we've done a lot of stakeholder and community engagement prior to the facility even being put in the public domain. So that's included a huge amount of engagement, thousands of people being directly door knocked. We've had live stands within shopping centres. We've also engaged directly with council and community, including briefings online. This slide gives you a bit of an example of the feedback that we've got, but one of the key call-outs for that is that people have come back and reviewed the project once they're provided information and context, generally being supportive of that. The key feedback we've got is that there's jobs being produced from it. It's a better option or a better option than an environmental outcome when compared to other ways of disposing of waste. There's renewable energy being produced. There's large investment in the community itself, and there's a state-of-the-art centre which we've really engaged very heavily on to provide that key cutting-edge technology for the actual the community itself. And where it's overall, we've reviewed that energy from waste, when put into context, is viewed positively by 90% of people. When we look at that overall, getting the social licence and social engagement is critical to operating within any form of community, and we're very keen to continue to participate with the community moving forward. If we look at the power market and what that looks like in New South Wales, there's a peak demand over summer. Generally, most people would expect that. And New South Wales energy prices generally move up and down, and that continues to be monitored throughout progress as we move forward. Overall, the facility itself will provide about 55 megawatts of base load electricity. There is 3 megawatts of parasitic load, which is utilised by the facility itself to maintain operations. We also then have opportunities to do things which are called behind the meter opportunities for selling power. So we can look at direct connections to reliable sources in the area who use significant amounts of power. It's pretty fair to say that there are some key requirements for power in Western Sydney, particularly around the area. So that's both power and steam and heat as well. We're also investigating further opportunities for carbon credits and then selling both behind the meter power as well as heat and steam to get that as an energy to local consumers. In terms of residual management, so I touched before that there are 3 key offtakes for what comes out sort of the back end of the facility after incineration. One of them is metals recovery for both ferrous and non-ferrous metals. So all ferrous and non-ferrous metals would be recovered from the ash, and those are recycled and taken off directly to metal recoverers. In addition to that, we have 2 types of ash. One is called incinerator bottom ash, which is directly the bottom ash from the facility, and that can be repurposed into different types of construction materials. So low strength concrete, road base, pavers, bricks, those sorts of things. We are working with the New South Wales EPA to go through an approvals process for that, which is a resource recovery exemption and a resource recovery order. If we're successful in that, that will allow us to divert over 95% of waste coming into the facility from landfill, which is a key component of the facility itself. These additional processing facilities for both ash and metals recovery will produce another 100 jobs overall. In addition to that, there's what's called flue gas treatment residue, which is the material that we scrub out of the air through the facility. That is then treated and is disposed of in landfill. That accounts for about 2 to 3% of the overall waste. In terms of revenue and expenses, I'll just hand over to Frank, who will take us through this.
Thanks, James. So there's 3 key ways for Cleanaway to generate value from this facility. Firstly is as an equity investor in the project itself. We'll be targeting double-digit return on equity for the project. The main source of revenue for the facility is the gate fees, so that comprises around 3/4 of the total revenue, with the residual from electricity and the metal and other residuals coming out of the facility. The second way is for Cleanaway as a key provider of waste to the facility. So instead of at the moment sending it to third parties, we'll be internalizing that through the project, avoid paying landfill gate fees, avoid paying the levies, and instead pay a energy from waste gate fee, which will be lower than the current landfill gate fee. So there's a saving in our disposal cost. And the third element is as the O&M provider to the facility. So we'll be operating the facility in return for a fee paid by the project. So those are the 3 ways. The O&M and waste supplier obviously accrues 100% to Cleanaway. The energy from waste project equity investment is 51% investment. Turning to the next slide, so it'll be set up through a special purpose vehicle, which will then have contractual arrangements with all these external parties, including our O&M contract, Cleanaway as a waste supplier, financiers, and importantly, the EPC contractor. So there's around 10 high quality technology providers. And as we progress with the project, we'll be running a tender process to select the best party for the facility. In terms of funding of the project, so on the equity side, it's a 51-49 funded by Cleanaway and Macquarie. Our intention is to retain that equity as a long-term owner and sponsor of the facility. For Cleanaway, for Macquarie, they will remain invested in the facility through the early stages of operations to make sure that we're aligned, and the longer term depends on what Macquarie would like to do. On the debt funding side, it'll be funded as a project finance project, non-recourse debt, and it'll be sourced from a combination of domestic, international lenders as well as super funds. Typical gearing for these type of projects depends a bit on how much of the waste is contracted, but it often sits at around 60 to 70% gearing in terms of the overall funding size.
In terms of the timetable for the Western Sydney project, so as I said before, the EIS has just been publicly displayed. That did complete on the 16th of November 2020, so very recently. We now go through the approvals process, so we have a response to submissions, which we need to consider over the next 3 to 4 months, working with DPI, New South Wales EPA and the various stakeholders. Following that, we then expect DPI to look at that with a view to approval. Should that be approved or recommended for approval, it then goes to the IPC, the Independent Planning Commission in New South Wales, and we were hoping for a development approval or completion of that in the 2nd to 3rd quarter next year, should everything go to plan. In terms of financial close, we'll follow up quickly after that with financial close, looking to do that late 2021 or early 2022. The facility itself will take approximately 3 years to construct and commission, with overall operations commencing 2024-2025. So at this point in time, we are continuing through that approvals process. There's a heavy amount of engagement to get us there, and we'll continue both the development of that, the commercialisation, as well as the response with a view to approval and moving that forward. That does include key parts of commercialisation, so that's feedstock supply, electricity offtake, which we touched upon before, as well as community and stakeholder engagement. So in terms of the overall summary, this is a key part of what we put out there every day. Some of the really key headline numbers, during construction, there's 900 direct jobs developed directly on the facility site. In addition to that, there's about 1,200 indirect jobs to support the construction, and then 50 permanent, highly skilled jobs moving forward. We've spoken about the diversion from landfill. We're targeting 95%, which would also be tied in with the reuse of the incinerated bottom ash as a construction material. About 390,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent avoided, which is almost taking 79,000 cars off the road per year. So very big impact there. In terms of overall quantities, the facility will take up to 500,000 tonnes of municipal and C&I waste per year. That's about 30% of Western Sydney's waste alone. About 55 megawatts of electricity produced, and then we recover metals and ash and reuse that overall. Technology we've touched on, the moving grate technology will be deployed at the facility. That is currently used in about 500 facilities in Europe alone, and about 2,000 facilities worldwide. So very proven technology, very strong proven reference facilities, which we've used to back up the facility here. In terms of investment, about $650 to $700 million of CapEx for the facility in Western Sydney, and we will continue to invest in Western Sydney long term with the jobs as well as growth overall. So that really sums up where we're up to in terms of the presentation overall. Happy to look and answer any questions and go from there.
Thanks, James, Frank, and Vic. I've got a few questions in the chat box already, but just a reminder, if anybody wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand or you can use the chat function. So I'll kick off with the first ones. So appreciate it as early, but could you give us a sense of funding structure assumptions behind the double-digit equity returns, leverage structure, debt repayment profile, if different from the commentary amortization over the life of the asset?
Yeah, so look, in terms of the funding, again, it depends a little bit how much gearing you put on, depends on how much is contracted, but between what we expect to get from local councils as well as what's available through our own system, we would be contracting a significant proportion, and we see no reason at the moment why we wouldn't be in line with other transactions like this, which are around a 70% gearing. So that's the overall capital structure, with the remainder funded through equity, and that would take you to IRRs in the double digits.
On I guess a related point, on the point about feedstock, how much of it is already secured and how much would still need to be contracted?
Yeah, so it's early days in terms of the actual contracting of the local municipal waste, but they are all coming up to align quite well with the opening of the facility. So that's a process that's ongoing within our business to speak to the councils about this. There's a lot of momentum behind energy from waste, and councils are keen to look at this as part of the solution for their waste going forward. So we're quite optimistic about the general direction and the intentions of the council. In terms of our own waste, we obviously know what we have, and between those sources, we're confident we can fill the facility.
And just to add what Frank is saying, two points. You're right, Frank, as you know, 2024 is when there's a couple of contracts coming up. So that conversation will start soon. Remember, we're also building, we already have an Erskine Park land for a transfer station, which takes about 300,000 tons of waste. It can come from any source, not just ours. Plus, we're building in Europe. So a combination of all of that, plus our efforts, we're pretty confident we will be able to fill this up.
I've got a question on social license, and a lot of objections coming through on the EIS process, but would you assume there's some bias, folks more likely to raise objections via this process versus your survey findings? How comfortable are you ultimately with community support?
So it's a good question. There were 630 submissions overall. Of those, there were 601 public submissions made. In terms of getting those submissions, generally all those submissions which came from the public were negative. There were 4 positive submissions only. When you put that into context, we went out and surveyed individuals. We didn't target anybody in particular. We actually targeted the community overall. So people who are objecting are the people who are speaking up. When you survey the entire community, if you think about Western Sydney alone, if you think about Blacktown local government area, There's a few 100,000 people in that local government area. We had, like I said, 601 community submissions. We have been working very, very hard with the community on that to move forward. In terms of overall acceptance, generally people, when they put it into context, are more acceptance of this, and our research is independent research, which has proven that. I think when you look at the targeted opposition to that, it's only the people who are saying no that are objecting. There's very little in terms of supportive submissions on that basis, but when you put it into context, you also have clear social infrastructure. So an example is the Powerhouse Museum of Parramatta had over 1,200 submissions, of which there were over 1,000 negative, I believe. We know, for example, WestConnect, similar social infrastructure, 20,000 submissions. So for us, we are very confident of our project. We're very confident of the process which takes us through that. And we are out there to provide a clear, cutting-edge technology, safe asset for the future.
One on business case assumptions. So what at this stage is assumed in relation to ash residue management, that there will be a landfill cost to dispose, or that there's an alternative use is approved?
So there are two types of ash. We have assumed in our base case that the flue gas treatment residue, which is also, there's a portion of ash in that, is going to landfill, correct? We have also assumed that the ash from the facility, the incinerated bottom ash, will be going to landfill, but the opportunity there is that we're considering that we can reuse that to get our targeted 95% landfill diversion.
So that's an upside onto the business case.
Yes.
What sort of power price is needed to reach the target equity returns?
That's a very detailed question. Happy to come back. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
But I think it is important to understand, though, that majority of the earnings of this plant comes from the gate fees, not from the power sale. It helps, of course, but it is really important we are not building a power plant. We are building an end of waste solution here. So I think that's a critical issue.
Yeah, there was a follow-up question on that about the levelized cost of energy for the asset, but I guess that's not how to think about that type of project. It's more a post-collections asset. Does the 51% equity stake mean it will be consolidated? Is that a Brendan question, or Frank? Can you?
No, I'm happy to answer that. No, look, it's not going to be consolidated, and certainly not through the construction phase. Obviously, outside of the actual equity ownership, there's a lot of other terms and conditions in the shareholders agreement that mean that it will not be consolidated and it'll be project funded with external debt.
And what are the key differences from the previously rejected dollar dump energy from waste proposal, either through technology or emissions, etc.?
So the key differences, I go back to our reference facility. The key part about the reference facility is complying with the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy, as well as our level of stakeholder engagement. So the reference facilities we have identified use similar waste streams, C&I and MSW waste, very important and quite different to anything else. They're also of similar size. So the Philborna facility is 200,000 tonnes a year, and the Dublin facility is about 600,000 tonnes a year. Very key. And also using the same technology. So the facilities have been viewed. We've looked at the data, and that has informed our decision. We do comply with the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy, which is fundamental to our proposal and is very important. In terms of social licence and social engagement, we've done a huge amount of stakeholder engagement. We continue to do that. Like I said before, we've door-knocked thousands of people's homes in the Western Sydney area. We've also engaged with local, state and federal government on this proposal, and we continue to do that as we move forward. So I think that probably outlines the key parts. Like I said, we will be going through IPC, the Independent Planning Commission, which will obviously bring a lot more to light as well.
Okay, we've got a few hands up, so I'm going to move to live questions. So Russell Gill, Russell, have you got a question for us?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Handful of questions. Just firstly, on the feedstock discussion, you noted in this presentation that it will be a bit more skewed to C&I initially, and just in terms of getting local council sign up, it looks like Fairfield and Blackdown have objected to the proposal, and Liverpool and Penrith have pretty big concerns with the proposal. Can you just talk through the dynamics of getting this over the line, and then I guess changing the perception with those councils that therefore in the future will send you red waste, residual waste into the facility?
Yeah, so in terms of the feedstock, I'll speak about that one quickly first. So the C&I skewed initially is to allow us to get to that tendering period within councils. Council contracts generally expire over a period of time, but are also long-lasting contracts. So the idea with the C&I is to allow the facility to get up to operational volumes, and then it'll be backed with MSW waste after that. So I hope that answers that part of it. Secondly, in terms of council engagement, Council, if we go through the submissions, have put out clear submissions and raised a lot of questions in there validly for their members and their constituents. What we do now is go through and actually address all of those questions, all of those concerns that they've raised, and continue with that. What we're seeing through that is that they're asking for a lot more information to ensure that the facility is both safe and operational. In terms of assessing those submissions, there are some submissions out there which you can read either way, I think, particularly the Fairfield one. Looking at that, there are some questions in there, but they're also saying, where is the independent part of the process, which, like I said before, is the Independent Planning Commission. So it's key.
The only thing I'll also add, Russell, is that their questions, as James says, should be seen differently. I mean, while they were writing that, we just won the Blacktown MRF contract. We won the Blacktown Collections contract a couple of months ago. So those are very independent process. In every council, there's a management team, Russell, and then there's a councillors. And what you see in a public domain is generally what they have to do compared to sometimes what they generally feel. I'll leave it at that, I think.
Right. I guess just on that dynamic as well, if you do have to fill up the facility in the next couple of years with C&I, how should we be thinking about the return profile, your double-digit IRR, and what percentage of the operational capacity can you come from current Cleanaway volumes internally? You mentioned 300,000 coming from Erskine Park, but does that soak up basically all the volume to make it economic? Can you hit that double-digit IRR returns on a C&I only strategy in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think we might just be very careful we don't overplay this C&I Muni shift. I mean, as I said, a lot of council contracts come up for renewal in 2024. This will be ready by that time. So we are not saying where this plant is going to be run by 80% C&I. It'll be a mix of both, with a view that over a period of time it'll go 100% to Muni. I think that's what we're trying to say, Russell, rather than say that it's going to be 500,000 tons of C&I waste coming through. That is not the point. It's just the transition point will go slowly, but it does not change the fact that this is meant for a pure waste where the whole values are, I guess, yeah.
And just one point, the whole economics, sorry, Russell, is the $143 levy or so in New South Wales means that in terms of the gate fees that the energy from waste can charge versus what a landfill needs to charge, including the levy, makes it competitive. So purely from an economics perspective, we're comfortable that this facility can offer competitive rates and better outcomes for the environment. So we're highly confident that between our own waste, third-party waste cancels, this will fill up.
I mean, Frank, just on that basis, do you expect as you fill it up in the next couple of years that potentially landfill gate fees come down as you withdraw volume from the marketplace? Do you expect that economic dynamic or not?
Look, it depends. Again, the levy is a key component of that. So you add the operating costs and the margin. There's some room, no doubt, but that will take more than one energy from waste facility to make that happen. So we're some time away from that.
Okay, and then just two final questions. Vic, obviously this is your proposal. Can you just talk through the dynamic if the Veolia Sewers merger does go through? What does your post-collections strategy look like in the next couple of years? And would this facility still have gone ahead if there was a major landfill for sale, I guess, on the far south or east coast of New South Wales metro market?
Yeah, so I think depends on what happens there, Russell. Our footprint plan does not fundamentally change, right? So that merger does not create an extra airspace in New South Wales. It just changes ownership, and whoever owns that extra landfill, the total capacity equation doesn't change. The total equation of part of the levy does not change. The total waste going into landfill versus that waste to energy doesn't change whether Veolia Sewers acquisition happens or not. So I think we should remember that. The other thing is, from our perspective, we've always maintained that we've got to have an integrated value chain system. We have landfills all over the state, as you know. And we have said it, we will be interested in building energy for waste both in Melbourne as well as in Brisbane, where we already have landfill. So we don't see this as an or with landfill. We see energy for waste as an and opportunity with landfill. So does government, and so does waste hierarchy match. So if those opportunities were to happen in New South Wales, nothing changes here, we carry on. Remember, they don't create extra capacity, just the ownership changes. If that was to happen and we were somewhere participating in it successfully, we will have a complete value chain assets in New South Wales like we have in other states, with transfer station hopefully coming with it, which is a critical point.
Well, give us an opportunity to ask. Sorry, Russell, just gotta.
Sure, fair.
Just give a few others an opportunity. There's a few hands up, so you've had a few questions. That's okay. Let's move to Cindy.
Hi, good morning. Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Good morning, gents, and thanks for the detailed presentation and congrats on the project progress. Just sorry for the pain, but just continue on the volume kind of topic. So, because our project is going to target for a project finance. So from project finance perspective, do you expect there will be a kind of minimum volume guarantee or minimum initial contracted volume kind of requirements as part of the conditions precedent for project finance?
Yes, absolutely, Cindy. So at the time of financial close, we would expect there to be a significant proportion of the waste to be contracted between Cleanaway and other third parties. That's correct.
Is there any like kind of percentage range that you expect?
No, not at this stage. But again, that's the only part that plays into is the extent of the leverage. Yeah, some of these facilities get away with 50-60% contracted at financial close, and others are closer to 100% that are council-backed contracts.
Yeah, and just to add, Cindy, the contracts are coming up in 24 in Council with Western Sydney. They will start negotiating around 22. Yeah, so we will know, we will have a very good sense in 21 and 22. A lot of those, and our aim would be lock them up as much as practically possible. Huh?
Got it, thanks. And in terms of the equity cash injection parts, are you going to like add additional corporate debt for this, or is like entirely from the cash on balance sheet?
Brendan, you want to answer that?
Yeah, look, for our proportion of the equity for this facility, we've got more than sufficient headroom within our existing debt facilities to fund that what we have now.
Yeah, great, got it, thanks.
Brendan, you want to add to that? Sorry, Cindy, I want to see if Brendan wants to add something to this. Sorry, I'm muted.
Yeah. Cool.
That's okay. Can Cindy carry on?
Yeah, just sorry.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Just lastly, on the bottom ash, do you expect the like incinerator bottom ash that is sent to the construction sites are going to pay for the reception, pay for the counterparties to receive those waste, or you are expecting to receive an actual revenue stream from that?
There's discussions going on depending on where it goes, what the treatment is, because it's not as straightforward as tipping it out of the truck and that's it. There's an actual processing requirement that goes with it, as well as what's called a maturation process. So it's sort of, we sit it there for anywhere upwards of 3 months, just to allow it to mature for some of the chemical characteristics as well. So there's a number of discussions going on. It's not finalised yet, and it won't be for some time on that point.
But, and importantly, just to add to that, the biggest thing around that is the cost avoidance of having to send it to landfill. So.
Correct.
Got it. Thanks, guys.
Brendan, if you want to add anything?
Yeah, just on the funding side there, Cindy. So look, we could support that on our own balance sheet. There's no reason for an equity raise there. We've certainly got the plenty of headroom, the facilities, and the cash generation over the next few years.
Yeah, and the capex will be part of our capex guidance.
It depends on the size of it. It could be a little bit more. but at this stage, within the CapEx guidance.
Great. Thanks, Brendan.
And we'll clarify that closer to the time. Closer to the time.
I'll move to Scott Ryle. Scott, I'll mute you.
Unmute. Okay, and there we go. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of questions you've dealt with already around the approvals process. Wasn't so long ago that the New South Wales minister who's in charge of this area raised doubts as to whether there was a social licence yet for energy from waste in the New South Wales market. So now that you've had the benefit of all the submissions and the submissions from council that you've seen, could you just detail for me, what do you think are the 2 or 3 issues that you've really got to nail down in terms of getting community and government acceptance for this project? And I guess I'll preface it by saying, obviously the world has changed quite a lot in the last 9 months, and there's more of a focus from government on jobs and new industries and things like that. So I'm sure there's probably a slightly different view in government now than perhaps there was a year or so ago. But could you just detail where do you think you've really got to do the work now to get the project across the line, please?
Gotcha.
The 2 key parts for it will be air quality and health, very key components, and has the ability to affect everybody. We have put together both an air quality assessment, which includes odour, as well as a human health risk assessment, which forecasts what the impacts could be or would be overall. And that looks at people sitting in the same location, eating, drinking, doing everything in the same spot for over 30 years. So the air quality and the health will be 2 huge parts of it. And we really do need to address that very clearly. We have put a lot of time, effort, and we have 2 very, very long-term industry experts who've worked for both the EPA as well as private consulting to prepare those inputs for us into the EIS. So those are probably the 2 biggest points which everybody needs to be comfortable with, and we as a corporate entity need to be comfortable with as well. So we stand by that, we stand by the technology, and we continue to push forward. And that will be demonstrated and will come out both in DPI's assessment report, who, mind you, have also put on 3 independent experts, and then it'll also come through the Independent Planning Commission review as well.
And the only thing I'll add to that, Scott, is during this process, as you know, there will be a fair amount of sound bites for different reasons which will come out, and we just have to be mindful of the fact that this will go to Independent Planning Commission, and it will be approved by that through a proper process. And our submission is, as James just said, the core of the issues are air quality and health, and as he said, the thousands and thousands of people who have been contacted individually. So at this point, maybe we feel pretty confident. Of course, it has to go through a process. And
is there any complexity around? You've obviously got a reference facility in Dublin that you've referred to quite a lot here, and no doubt that's in the discussions you've had around the approval process as well. Do you have any complexities around getting across the success of that Dublin facility, given no one can travel to Dublin to see it? Is there any issues you're facing there, COVID related, around utilising that as a reference facility?
In a word, no. And the reason why is because we can get live emission data coming out of that facility, in a matter of minutes from the internet. That is the most fundamental part to what we're doing. We also have very close ties, like I said, through our project partner Macquarie, who are a key investor in that. So getting information and details out of the facility is no problems. We do get that. I get stuff very regularly from them, but also second to that, it's available freely on the internet, so we can log into that. And it ties back to New South Wales's energy from waste policy, which stipulates you must have reference facilities. Again, coming back to why other projects haven't gone there, these reference facilities are cutting edge technology, they're operational, and they fit those 3 key parts. One is similar or same waste streams, similar or same size, and the same technology, which we're using exactly the same across the board. So I hope that answers the question.
Yep, it does. Very clear. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a question from Paul Butler. Paul, I'll ask you to unmute yourself.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just want to ask the waste material that will be used through this facility, the C&I and the municipal solid waste, is that being diverted from putrescible landfills or from inert landfills?
Putrescible landfills. It's all red bin waste, is residual red bin waste. There is resource recovery prior to that. I spoke about the source separation, and also in accordance with the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy. To increase that, there's a pre-processing facility, which is sort of a bolt-on at the front of the energy from waste plant overall. So it's all putrescible waste, red bin residual waste.
Okay, and do you, I mean, with the proportion of C&I waste that you'll have initially, are you expecting to hit that target of 95% landfill diversion early on in the life of the asset, or is that something that you get to after you have a higher proportion of the municipal waste coming through?
The 95%, should the ash reuse be approved, will be almost immediate from that. So the key part to that is getting the incinerator bottom ash through the New South Wales EPA to be reutilised at the back end as construction materials, construction products, what we get to. That will allow us to divert 95% from landfill, basically at completion of commissioning. So immediately for the lifespan of the project and the facility.
Okay, and can you give us a bit more colour on the operating costs that you're expecting? You've said, I think there's 50 full-time staff involved. What does the breakdown of the cost base look like, and can you give us some quantum around it?
Yeah, look, it's a bit too early days to answer that. I mean, the bottom line is, in terms of the overall structure of these facilities, they're high upfront capex, high margin facilities, and that's how we get to the returns. But it's too early to provide details on the operating costs.
Yeah, and Paul, this will be hopefully 24/7 plants running 3 shifts each with no more than 10-12 people. There are technical people, you've got engineers and maintenance, etc. So it's a fully automated plant with white collar workforce, just managing it on a day-by-day basis, making sure it's maintained, safe, and running smoothly. So that's what you're looking at.
Is the labour cost the major proportion of the cost base, or are there? There's obviously maintenance costs and things like that. I'm just trying to get a sense of are there other big costs?
No, the labour will be a cost, but not a major cost on an ongoing basis. It's a pretty small cost.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, a couple of quick chat ones in. Any idea of what level of gate fee you plan to charge relative to surrounding landfills? And can you confirm the Erskine Park extension plans total in annual tonnes and timeline for planning process?
Well, the first one, we would not be sharing the gate fees plan. That will be not right for a whole host of reasons, and that will be negotiated with the customers. On the Erskine Park landfill extension, we already have the extension in hand. We have to do some construction around that to create that extra hole. That we are expecting it to give us anything from 450 to 500,000 tonnes. And as I said, we can fill that up in 3 years' time, or 2 years' time, or 6 years' time, depending on what waste we put in. Considering it's a sought-after landfill, we expect not to take a normal C&D waste. We will probably try to hit a high-end asbestos-filled soil, etc., because that gets a better margin to extend it. So that extension, we already have the extension in hand. We just have a construction to do now to get it ready over the next couple of months.
Okay. And 2 quick last ones. All the environmental benefit comes from avoiding methane generation in the landfill. Is this a net number? Isn't methane captured at landfills and turned into energy which avoids fossil fuel?
So the answer to that is yes. The graph which we put up before for the landfill takes into account methane capture of 50% as a conservative number and reused for power generation. So yes, that already does include for 50% capture.
Finally, the project cost has gone from 500 million to 650, now to 650 to 700. What's the reason for the inflation?
Yes, so we have introduced a lot of new technology into it to comply with the document which came out in late last year, which is the BREF, Best Available Techniques document. So we've looked at some additional equipment and kit, which is covered in the presentation, to ensure that we are meeting the emissions targets and emissions levels of that directive which came out. So there is an investment in that. There's also an investment in there to ensure that the facility is at the highest end of best techniques in the world.
This is the first energy from waste on the East Coast. New South Wales is the market which needs to get cracked, frankly, strategically as well as commercially. And we obviously want to make sure there's no reason why the approval process doesn't come through. Hence, over-engineered around wet scrubber, etc., which possibly new plants may or may not need. But at this point, we have taken the extra steps.
Final question from James.
Hi, gents. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just coming back to slide 11, where you talk about FOGO. Can you talk about the significance of achieving this for the overall economics?
The significance ties in with what is allowed under the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy to be put directly into the facility. So it's sort of taking away pre-processing. So really it ties in quite well with that, as well as the sources, so the MSW waste. It is being rolled out and councils are seeing great benefits for reducing the volumes of residual waste produced per capita. You would have seen on the slide that Penrith is on the far right-hand side. So their per capita production of residual waste is reducing. So it's actually beneficial for councils to do it straight away and implement that. The key part, and I suppose the key problem with it, is actually getting the uptake from the councils to both invest in it and to implement it within their local government area. So what we are committing to is an investment in that as part of the facility to assist and help councils both in terms of implementing, introducing, and then following through with that with some infrastructure to process it.
Right. So that investment, that I guess the teaching, if you will, to help improve the quality of the red bin is needed to make sure that you can process this material.
Exactly, it assists with that, but I think it goes without saying that if you give them a green bin and they don't know what to do with it, it doesn't help. So give them a green bin as well as educate and foster that moving forward through education programs, through encouragement, and yes, it does assist on the back end for us. That's how the policy works. We have to comply.
That's in line with the policy.
Correct.
That's in line with the policy, James. Important point.
Right, and so that's why the feedstock at the beginning is mostly CNI and transitions to municipal waste 100% over time, because you need to get the quality of the FOGO bins up before you have 100% reliance on that.
You also need the council contracts to be renewed to actually get a contract. If they're contracted for, say, 6 years, the timing doesn't work because our facility will be operational in about 4 years. So for that 2-year period in the middle, you need something to continue the facility. That's why we're looking at both a CNI and an MSW mix.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. And then when you talk about those reference.
But it's a pute. I want to make point, James, so we don't get confused. We're not talking about CNI inert waste. It is still a pute waste. Huh? That's a really important point. So when we talk CNI, we're still talking about CNI pute and MSW pute, yeah? So that's an important point.
Got it. But the municipal waste that you will eventually put into your plant as feedstock still requires to pass a certain level of FOGO, if you will, before you can put it in, just to be crystal clear on that.
There are different volumes that we can take in, and it's based on a percentage basis for the red bin waste, depending on what other bins they have. If it's a 2 bin, there's a percentage. If it's a 3 bin system, there's a different percentage. So through the policy, you can calculate that per council area, and it actually changes depending on what level of multiple bin system they have introduced. And that's directly from the New South Wales Energy from Waste policy.
Got it. Just to add, it does not mean FOGO in every council. It depends on, can you clarify that as well?
So it doesn't mean that we don't have to have FOGO implemented to allow us to use that waste. It just decreases the percentage of red bin waste, which can be sent to an energy from waste facility if there's no FOGO. If they implement FOGO, we can take more of that waste, and that is stipulated directly from the policy.
Got it. So what's the theoretical upside then if you get complete compliance with FOGO?
It actually depends on how many we have in the council area, depending on the mixture of waste. So it's quite a difficult question to answer without actually multiplying out per council area, as well as looking at the volume of waste overall. So,
got it. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, we might wrap it up at that. Thank you all for participating this morning. I'll be in touch for the next session, which will be in late December. Yes, thanks Vic, Frank and James for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good job. Thank you.